Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, May the 16th, and here are the headlines for today. A strong trough is positioned currently over the Rockies, and we can expect a low-pressure system to develop out ahead of it. And this is going to spark showers and thunderstorms each day this weekend and into early next week. In fact, two of the main ingredients that we need for severe weather, one is the bulk shear. It's going to lead to the development of supercells over the Great Plains Saturday through Monday. And there's no end in sight really to the severe weather. It looks like we'll have that push off to the east. So locations even over the Ohio Valley can expect the severe weather into the middle of next week. Now, because we're talking about all the severe weather this weekend, I wanted to ask my audience, do you know what bulk shear is? And why does increasing amounts of bulk shear lead to severe weather? Now, if you know the answer to both of these questions, just leave those in the comments down below. Well, guys, that's it for the headlines this weekend. Let's get into some of the details. Well, guys, I want to start out by looking at the radar loop for the day Saturday. And we can see a lot of showers and thunderstorms over the Ohio Valley and parts of the Midwest, extending into West Virginia and even Pennsylvania during the early part of the day. Now, one thing you'll notice is by mid-afternoon into the evening on Saturday, we start to get these supercell thunderstorms begin to develop over the Great Plains in the Midwest, and in particular over the states of Nebraska and Iowa. In fact, around 7 p.m. will probably be the most dangerous time for supercells to develop. And we can see here over central Nebraska, according to the high-resolution model, and even here along the border of Nebraska and Iowa. Looks like we have some supercells forming there as well, and even some spotty activity here in southern Iowa. Now, where these set up specifically is hard to tell, but I think anywhere in Nebraska, let's say northern Kansas into much of Iowa, I think you're ground zero here for the severe weather during the day Saturday. I do want to point out here over the Ohio Valley into Kentucky, and let's say into West Virginia and also western Pennsylvania here, we could still have strong thunderstorms. And we couldn't rule out, let's say, a severe thunderstorm here over the Ohio River Valley during the day Saturday. But you could expect, let's say, maybe strong gusty winds, small hail in this area. Whereas over Nebraska and Iowa, you guys could expect the possibility of tornadoes, especially late in the day Saturday. Now, the culprit for all this severe weather over the next couple of days is this trough currently positioned over the west. And that's going to be building to the east the next couple of days into the Intermountain West. And that's going to position it in a favorable area here to set up a dry line just east of the Rockies. And that's going to help to fire up strong thunderstorms each day. Again, we're talking about Saturday, Sunday, Monday for the Great Plains. That threat will eventually push off to the east as we head into the middle part of next week. But until that happens, if you live in Nebraska, Kansas, parts of Oklahoma, eastward into Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, up into Wisconsin, this whole area is going to deal with severe weather for several days. And another detail we need to pay attention to is this low pressure system. If we have a closed low moving over the Great Plains, that's going to add more instability as we approach Monday. As we push into the day Sunday, you'll notice that the trough has pushed to the south and east. And with it, we're going to have the threat of severe weather push a little bit further to the east as well. In fact, this entire area here over the Great Plains could be an area that sees a threat of tornadoes as we move into the afternoon. One of the things we'll be looking at here in a moment is the wind shear as well as the dew points at the surface. These are two key features that we can look for severe weather, especially accompanied with a strong trough like we're seeing here over the weekend. Now, as we skip ahead to the day Monday, you'll notice that we have this low pressure system now out over the Great Plains. Again, we had mentioned a moment ago, if that does happen where we get a close low, that's going to add further instability to the atmosphere. Also, take note of the isobars around this low pressure system, especially here in the northwestern quadrant of it. You'll notice that the lines are tightly packed together. And what that means more or less is that you're going to have higher winds in that area. And that means that more dangerous thunderstorms could develop along this zone here, where we do have those isobars stacked tightly together. Now I'm going to kind of back things up for the day Saturday to first look at the wind shear over the Great Plains. And this zone in particular here I want to highlight because we're going to couple this with the dew points later to kind of pinpoint where the severe weather is going to be most prominent. And you'll notice here I circled primarily Nebraska and Kansas. And if you look at areas that have this pink on the map here, that's where we have, let's say, bulk shear values of about 40 knots. And that's really the borderline between getting, let's say, regular thunderstorms and getting into some severe weather. And we do have sufficient bulk shear here, especially between the states of Kansas and Nebraska. But not all bulk shear is accompanying, let's say, these higher dew point values and the moisture needed at the surface for severe weather to take place. One of the things that can help us identify is the position of the trough here. We can see a strong push here of cold air coming out of Canada. And we can also see like a leading edge here as well that's associated with the trough. And we're going to see that push forward with time further south and east as we move from Saturday into Sunday. And in fact, in this next image, you can again see where this trough has moved further to the south and east. And of course, that will continue to push further and further east with time. But out ahead of again, we have those higher dew points, and that's going to be adding to that potential for severe weather where we have higher values of bulk shear. So again, over the same region that we talked about before, over Nebraska, Kansas, and to parts of Iowa here, you can see where we're starting to get these deeper pink values. That means we have bulk shear values now going into the 50s. And again, once you get up into the 50s and eventually the 60s, that becomes very dangerous for the development of severe thunderstorms, especially these long-lived supercell thunderstorms that form typically late in the afternoon. And when we get to the day Monday, this is a particularly dangerous situation that we're moving into. You can see where we have now this red area over the state of Nebraska, potentially down into, let's say, western Kansas and into parts of Iowa. Now, this whole region here, I do want to point out where we have this purple here, especially extending, let's say, eastward into Missouri, Iowa, up into Minnesota. That whole region has the potential, due to the higher dew points at the surface, to have very strong thunderstorms develop. However, in this red region here over Nebraska, potentially into Kansas, maybe as far east as Iowa, depending on how this changes the next couple of days, we have bulk shear values approaching 70 to 80 knots. Now, the big takeaway about bulk shear is it changes the tilt of the updraft. And the updraft more or less feeds the thunderstorm. So if you have these higher bulk shear values, it creates a tilt of that updraft that keeps these thunderstorms rolling for a very long time. And when you look at the radar and you see these red dots on the screen and they just continue on, it's because their updrafts are very healthy. It's keeping these storms alive much longer. Now, what I want to do here is pivot back to Saturday and take a look at the dew points here during the afternoon. And we can see that we have favorable conditions here over Texas, up through Missouri, into Iowa. Again, you can see a dew point there of 68 over parts of Missouri. And that combined with the bulk shear values that we were just discussing will lead to that severe weather potential. Again, look in that favorable region over Iowa, back into Nebraska, Kansas, perhaps eastward into Missouri here. That zone's going to have not only the bulk shear values, right, that we're talking about, but also that surface level moisture that's going to be able to feed into the thunderstorms that are developing in the afternoon. Also note the dry line here over Texas, where we have dew points going from the teens into the 60s here. So again, the dry line can act as a firing area for thunderstorms as well. Now, I do want to point out that we have these higher dew points over the Midwest and the Ohio Valley as well. So this whole area will probably experience showers and thunderstorms through the day Saturday. Now, as we move into the day Sunday, one thing you'll notice is that the dew points, these higher dew points at least, move into southern Minnesota, Wisconsin, parts of South Dakota here. So you can imagine that the severe weather threat is going to expand, right, over the central plains into portions of the Midwest here. So this whole region will probably experience severe weather to some extent. Now, the primary area that's going to experience the worst of this again is going to be along the boundary between the moist air and the dry air. So if we look at Nebraska, into Kansas, Missouri, also into Iowa there, that region's going to probably be ground zero for the most intense severe weather and perhaps the strongest tornadoes that do form. Now, as we move into Monday, one thing you'll probably notice is this push of drier air, these lower dew points into the northern Great Plains. And we're going to have a well-defined line here where we have a frontal system set up here. So we're going to probably have a strong cold front during the day Monday here over the Great Plains. And over the state of Nebraska in particular, you can probably see this area where we have blue, green, and yellow come together. That's going to likely be the position of our low pressure system. So you're going to have all kinds of lift and mixing of the atmosphere in that zone. So if you live in the state of Nebraska on Monday, it could be a particularly dangerous situation for you guys, as you'll have winds out of every direction there, depending on where you are in the state. And this is going to be a zone where we have a closed low setting up. So you have the bulk shear, right? You have the higher dew points there over central and eastern Nebraska. But you also have this developing low pressure system moving out over the Great Plains. So you're going to have that added instability and the lift, right? That convergence there due to the low pressure system. So all these ingredients are coming together where we could have a severe weather outbreak, especially during the day Monday. Well, guys, if we take a look at the Storm Prediction Center and what they have forecast the next several days, we can see that there's an enhanced risk here over parts of Nebraska, even northeastern Colorado, into northern portions of Kansas here. But there's also a very good chance here, even though it's a slight risk, of severe weather over much of Nebraska into Iowa, even northern portions of Missouri here. And we're going to see this expand into the day Sunday and then again on the day Monday. Now, one of the main differences we saw were those higher dew points, right? That surface level moisture moving into Minnesota, Wisconsin, South Dakota. Now, this region already had bulk shear values between 40 and 50 knots over Minnesota and Wisconsin. But now we have those higher dew points at the surface. So that combination, again, will likely lead to severe weather as we get into the day Sunday. Notice more concerning here is that that area of enhanced risk has expanded. And that includes much of Nebraska, Iowa, into South Dakota and Minnesota. So this could be an increase in tornadic activity from Saturday into Sunday. But also take note of the marginal risk here over much of the northern Great Plains, the central plains, as far south as Texas here, extending into Missouri, perhaps into the UP of Michigan. Now, as of Friday night, as of the making of this video, there is a 30% chance of severe weather on the day Monday. Again, this extends from the Central Plains into the UP of Michigan here. And this is a particularly dangerous situation, once again, for severe weather. Again, according to those higher dew points that we were seeing during the day Monday. Now, not only do we have that low pressure system, that closed low, right, developing over the Central Plains during the day Monday, but we also have a strong cold front, right, pushing out of the northern Great Plains. And that's going to push south and east with time as we move from Monday, perhaps into Tuesday and Wednesday into the Ohio Valley. So if you live downstream into parts of Illinois, Missouri, back into Kentucky, perhaps West Virginia, also Western Pennsylvania, I would pay attention to Tuesday and Wednesday time frame for severe weather for you guys. Well, guys, I'm going to finish off by looking at a potential sounding for the day Monday over the state of Kansas. So to kind of point your attention here to the upper right-hand corner, this map here. You can notice that I have this red circle here, basically over the center of the state of Kansas. And just for context here, what the colors are showing again on this map are the dew points. So the moisture at the surface. Blue is showing dew points in the teens. The green is showing dew points in the 40s. And where we're seeing the orange here is dew points in the 60s, perhaps up to 70 degrees in some cases. So where we have those higher dew points, again, we're going to transfer that moisture into the clouds somehow. Now, where we have those dew points in the 60s and 70s, we want to determine how effective that moisture is being transferred into these developing thunderstorms. Now, we need high levels of moisture at the surface, but we also need dry air above the surface. And when that's in place, the contrast of the two, then we can have these very strong thunderstorms develop. Now, one thing we can look for on the sounding is the separation of two particular lines. Now, I want to point your attention to this purple line. And what that's showing you here is the temperature of the moist parcel rising up in the atmosphere. And what you want to do is compare that to this red line here, which is the temperature of the air around it. And the greater the separation of the two, so more or less the distance between these two lines here, the greater the available potential energy to these thunderstorms. So if we look at the convective available potential energy here, we can see that we got a very large area of red on the map. Now, if I point your attention here to the right, you can see boxed off in red, the available potential energy to these thunderstorms is around about 2,500 joules per kilogram. Now, you only need about 1,000 to develop a severe thunderstorm. We have over 2,500 available to the storms during the day Monday. Now, the next thing I want to point your attention to is the bottom right-hand side of this chart. So I'm going to circle it in blue here to direct your attention. And take a look at this bottommost box here. You'll notice that we have a flag-like feature, right, with two little marks on it. And basically, each one of those marks is 10 knots. So we have this wind speed of 20 knots here. I also want to point out that the direction of these winds are out of the southeast, or the south-southeast in this case. And that is in contrast to this box above it. And this box above it is in the mid-levels of the troposphere. You'd say that's about the 500 millibar height level. And one thing you'll notice is that we have a solid flag here, which indicates about 50 knots. And we also have this other little tick beside it, which is about 5 knots, so around 55 knots. Now, to simplify things, I rounded up, so it's about 60 knots here, and that's what we have just above it here in the atmosphere as well. You can see that we have a difference here of 20 to 60 knots, or about 40 knots. And one would assume that, oh, well, the change in wind speed here is about 40 knots here, and that's the kind of shear we're going to have in the atmosphere. Well, this is where direction comes in. You'll notice again that the winds are out of the southeast here in that lower box, whereas in contrast, the winds are out of the southwest. And without getting into all the math here that goes into this, and this is measuring magnitudes and whatnot, the bulk shear in this case would be about 63 to 65 knots. And again, it calculates not only the change in wind speed, but also the change in wind direction. And the more in opposition they are to one another, the greater the impact on those bulk shear values. And we saw during the day Monday, we saw this range between 60 to as much as 80 knots, right, of bulk shear. And this is necessary for the development of those thunderstorms as we previously talked about. Now, as previously mentioned, the higher the bulk shear values, the stronger the updraft, right, going into these thunderstorms. And again, we can have these long-lived supercells that develop. And this is going to be particularly the case for the day Monday. But again, if you live in this area of Kansas, Nebraska, perhaps into Missouri, Iowa, that whole region, we're going to have these higher bulk shear values. We're going to have these higher dew point values. And eventually, we're going to have a closed low moving over this same area. And all these factors will likely be in place during the day Monday over this region. Well, guys, we'll leave it at that today. I hope you enjoyed today's forecast. If you did, please leave a like or subscribe. And also there's a bell icon. If you hit that, you'll be updated about new videos that are posted each day. Also, if you have an answer to the questions that we talked about before, just leave those down in the comments below. I'll just see you guys next week for the next video. Bye for now.